Welcome. This is the webinar, The Perspective of Heaven, and what we're going to talk about is how you work with people who are suffering and help them reframe and re-see their situation through the perspective of heaven, through God's eyes, instead of through the human perspective. And the fundamental thing that we want to get at is the human perspective is, this hurts, get me out of here. Heaven's perspective is that God is for you and He has something beautiful and good for you, even in the midst of ugly situations, if you're willing to lean in and look and find that. So what I'm going to do today is talk about how you help people find that, find how to grab a hold of God within difficulty. I want to give you a quick introduction to the interface here. As you're looking at your screen, I'm in the middle. Hi, I'm Tony Stoltzfus. To my left is a PowerPoint window. It says the perspective of heaven. I'm switching the PowerPoints. So that's what that is. Down below that, there's a file pod. And what I did is I put in there a free excerpt from the book, The Calling Journey. So this is the story of, I believe this one's Abraham's calling timeline and his story from the perspective of heaven. So if you're interested in that, that's a free download. You just click on it and you can download that. Directly under the video feed, there's a chat window, and you'll see people's chat sort of scrolling up as we go. There's a scroll bar on the right if you want to look back at something. And if you'd like to type, just click in the box down there at the bottom, and you can type in whatever you want, and it'll show up. You can also, if you want to talk to someone individually, like if you see a friend's name in the list and you want to say hi, if you go over to the right, there's a list of attendees. And if you hold your mouse over the name, it'll give you the option to start a private chat. So you can click that, and then what you type in the chat box will only go to that person. So feel free, if you want to at some point say hi to somebody, you can do that. So we're going to go ahead and dive in here, and we'll probably have some others join us along the way. So what I want to do here is, as we're talking about how you coach people in suffering, I'm going to start with a suffering story. And the first thing we're going to do is look at what's the difference between the perspective of heaven and the perspective of earth, and how do we quantify some of that. What does it look like when I'm in the perspective of earth? What does it look like when I'm in the perspective of heaven? So I'm going to tell you a story from my life of a difficult time that I was in. And what I want you to do is, as I tell the story, jot down what I believe. What do I believe about myself? What do I believe about God? What do I believe about how life works? So see if you can sort of tease out when you see a belief statement. And a belief statement would sound like, God is such and such, or life works like this, or I am a failure. Those are belief statements. They're telling what I believe about life, and those are a really important thing to look for as you're coaching and helping people. So see what kind of, sometimes I'll say it, sometimes you'll just hear the story and sort of get the picture in your mind, but jot down the belief statements that you hear, and then we'll go back and unpack some of that. So everybody's got to have one really stupid prayer in their life. Mine was, God, take the next 5 years of my life and just sanctify me. And I'd gotten a hold of this book, and the author's thesis was, I'm trying to put myself back into being 25 here. The author's thesis was that in the early church, nobody led anything except the apostles, because you have to get sanctified over a period of years before you lead. So his idea was it was 5 or 10 years before anybody else led anything, because they had to get sanctified. And I was young and excited about God, and I looked at that and I was like, if this is what it takes to be released in ministry, if this is what it takes to really be serious about God, I'm all into that. So I started to pray, God, take the next 5 years of my life and just sanctify me. And the picture I had in my mind of what that was going to look like, a lot of times when we do this, we have a picture, but it's not fully conscious. It's just sort of in there. So the picture in my mind, praying for 5 years of sanctification, was that I was going to be on this onward and upward path to glory. My trajectory was going to look like this, and by the time I was 28 or 29, I would be preaching to the thousands and leading people to the Lord and whatever it is that people that are really successful as Christian leaders do. But what I had in my mind was sanctification meant releasing and filling with power, and the better I got, the more God could move through me. So this was going to make me better. And what started to happen was not what I expected. Our church was a cell group church, so in cell churches, the small groups are essentially looked at as here's where you get your pastoral care, and the cell leader functions sort of like a pastor. And so I was leading one of these cell groups at 23 or whatever it was. And one night we had a meeting, and halfway through the meeting, people started talking about their dissatisfaction with the small group. And they pretty quickly discovered that most of them were dissatisfied, and they pretty quickly came to the conclusion that we should disband as a group. So right there in the meeting, they decided they weren't coming anymore, and this was the end. And obviously that was sort of a blow to my, that shouldn't be happening to somebody who's really a solid Christian. And then I was in a band, and we were traveling and doing worship renewal all over the country, and I was making an impact, and lives were being changed, and I was one of the main male singers and guitarists. Well, then another guy joined the band, and he was way better than me. He'd been the lead actor in a movie already. This guy was way talented, and so he sort of filled up all the space that I had inhabited. And I ended up getting sent back to run sound during the concerts. And I can remember sitting in the back and crying and just feeling so left out and useless because I wasn't up there. Everybody else was up there touching people's lives, and I was in the back doing this nothing job. Well, then we cut an album and went into the studio, and the sound guy got saved, and he joined the band. Well, guess what? He was way better at running sound than me, and so I became the gopher, and I had no role at all. And then it was like my prayer life just stopped working. And I was, at that point in my life, I was Mr. Discipline. I had my yearly goals and my monthly goals and my Bible study plan and my hour of power every day, and I met with another guy 3 times a week for an hour to pray, and I fasted every week. And if you weren't living that way, there was a place in heaven for you, but you were a spiritual wimp, essentially. You weren't serious about God, because the people who were serious about God were disciplined. And if you're not disciplined, you're not trying. And what happened to me was I couldn't do it. And my discipline started just falling apart. I would go to pray, and I couldn't stand to be with God. I'd be there for 5 minutes, and I'd get so guilty and anxious and feel so condemned that I'd leave. Didn't read any Christian books for a year, which of course I felt horrible about, because that's what you do when you're a serious Christian, is you fill your mind with Christian stuff. And I just couldn't get far enough away from it. And I finally got to this place where I just said, God, I give up. I can't do this. I can't live the Christian life. And God didn't say anything back. I wasn't hearing much from God at that point. And I didn't think I deserved to hear much from God at that point, because I was totally screwing my life up. And I just said, I give up. I'll be one of those people like Paul talks about, that get into heaven with the clothes burn off their back, smelling of smoke, and all your works burn up. At least I'll get to heaven, but my life will not mean anything. So, that's the first part of the story. I'm going to stop there for a moment. So tell me, as you're listening to that story, what do I believe about myself, about God, about faith and how it works? What are some of the beliefs that you heard? And just go ahead and everybody type in something at the same time, and then we'll stop and debrief a little bit. What did I believe? And I'll sing Kumbaya while you're typing or something like that. And those beliefs can be about God, about myself, about Christianity. What do I believe? I'll give you another 30 seconds to finish here. Okay, good. So let's look at a couple. I believed I'd lost my purpose, Susan said. Now there's a belief behind that of what purpose looks like. That the belief is, if I'm doing a Christian right, I should be successful. Things should be growing. So the corollary of that is, if I'm suffering or things aren't working, I'm doing something wrong. And that's a fundamental belief that's at the heart of, most of us believe that in some way and at some times in life, that things are supposed to work as a Christian, and if they don't, something's wrong with me. So there's a key belief. Joanna says, I'm useless serving in the background. I need to be at the forefront. So there's a belief that being successful or being what I'm born to be as a Christian needs to be big and spectacular. And if it's in the background or it's small or it doesn't meet my expectations, then again, something's wrong. So a lot of these beliefs, I'm a C on the DISC, if you know DISC. I'm an INTJ on the Myers-Briggs. So a lot of the beliefs that I developed were, if this isn't happening, something's wrong. And that's what I was living out of. Only sanctified leaders can lead well. Mindy says, you thought discipline and works were the key rather than relationship with him. Exactly. There are two beliefs there. One is my relationship with him depends on doing these things. And if I'm not doing these things, then something's wrong in my relationship with him. Ooh, that was an insight right there. Years later, I just thought of this. I was in this, how do I say? I got in some ministry situations where relationships broke down, and I realized I had this belief that if the relationship is broken, something's wrong with me. And what I just saw was I believed the same thing with God. That if it doesn't look like it's working, something's wrong with me. That's fascinating. So I thought discipline was the key to the relationship, and I thought discipline was the key to living the Christian life. I suck, Patty says. That's great. I was coaching a guy the other day, and he felt like he sucked. That was the way he described it. So I said, well, let's talk to Jesus about that. Jesus, what I feel about myself right now is I suck. But what do you say? So he prays for about 15 seconds, and he started laughing. And I said, what do you see? And he says, I see Jesus holding this big sign over his head. It says, Ed doesn't suck. And it really touched his heart and changed something. So anyway, yeah, I believe that I suck. I was rigid about what actions would be acceptable to God. Let's see. Your acceptance is based on your performance. You can't help from behind the scenes. Oh, that's a good one, Marie. I had to know what God wanted to do with my life, and then I needed to make it happen. And so a lot of these beliefs are perspective of earth type beliefs. When I'm functioning in the perspective of earth, I'm functioning in this deficit mode. God, I'm not sure if God likes me and I have to make him like me. Or I'm functioning in this mode of, I have to control life. I need to know what's supposed to happen. I need to know my destiny. I need to know where I'm supposed to be in a year. And then I need to make that happen. And those are the kinds of things that lock us into this perspective of earth. So let me tell you the second part of the story and tell me what I believe and how the perspective changes here. So I get to the place where I give up and I say, God, I'm through. If you can use me, you do it, but I just can't do this anymore. And the funny thing that happened is God started speaking to me that he loved me. And this was back in the rebuking days of the early charismatic movement. So I rebuked the love of God for about 6 weeks. This cannot be God, because in my theology, I was blowing it, and therefore God didn't love me in that moment. And so I rebuked God, for a while, until it finally started to penetrate my skull that I was loved because God loved me, not because I was a good boy or I did things right or all these other things. God just loved me. And that was an amazing insight. And the other funny thing about this is I had this, over the years before, this sort of instinctive sense that I didn't really understand grace. I grew up in a Christian home. I became a Christian really young. I'd always tried to do the right thing. And I felt like I didn't know, so I'd been praying, God, help me understand grace. Well, the funny thing about grace is unmerited favor. So if you're going to understand unmerited favor, what has to happen with your sense of your own merit? You have to lose it. So if you're praying to understand grace, you're praying to look bad because you can't understand it when you think everything's good. And God took me to a place where things weren't working in my life. And that's where I got the thing that my heart most desired, that I understood grace and that he had grace for me, and I didn't have to make it all work. So now, take a minute there and type in, what do I believe that's different than before? What shifted when I got a new perspective on my situation? And feel free and put a phrase in or something like that. What did I believe and what shifted about myself, about God, about how life works? Sure I'm plugged in. I'll give you a little bit more to type. If you're done, go ahead and read what other people are writing. So yeah, go ahead and finish typing if you're doing it. I'm going to go back and start touching on some of these. So one of the things that shifted was I moved from, Susan says it, that you were okay. I moved from a deficit performance mode that I had to impress God or get his favor into a mode where I had his favor even though I wasn't being impressive. So one of the primary shifts was either God's against me or I'm not on the right side of God to I am on the right side of God. He's for me. Love is not conditional. You were loved regardless. Yeah, that's that fundamental shift. That I'm less tuned into. I move from, in the perspective of Earth, I'm thinking about how bad I look, to me, to God, to everybody. When I'm in the perspective of heaven, I'm thinking about how God looks at me. So my viewpoint changes. That's good, Patty. It's not about me, it's about God. Yeah, that's interesting, Marie. Before I was telling God what to do, and afterward he was talking, and I was listening. So there's a fundamental, the reason I'm telling this story is this is a good picture. When you're coaching people in suffering, this is the crucial thing that needs to happen. That helps them move forward, that relieves the pain, that gets them unstuck. Is I have to stop looking at it from my perspective. This is bad, get me out of it. And I need to start looking from the perspective of God. What is God doing? What is God showing me? How is God loving me in this situation? So I want to explore a little bit, and as usual, I've completely fallen behind my PowerPoint. So here's sort of a model of the basic truths that we're going for in this. Heaven's perspective is that God's for me. So my relationship with God is not about that I'm in a deficit, but that He's for me. God's redeeming my circumstances to form me. So I don't look at negative circumstances like, okay, God caused this to cause me pain. I look at them in terms of no matter what happens, God is going to take it and make something beautiful out of it. So the concept you want people to tune into is not so much where did my circumstances come from? Is it my fault? Did I do something bad? Is God punishing me? That's not the question. The question is, how is God taking this bad situation and making something beautiful out of it? And the way He makes it beautiful is by forming me. I get more of Jesus inside of me. So that's the second principle. And the third one is His plan is a process. And what that means is most Christians approach change as a decision. I see what's wrong and I decide to change. And the change process is about me deciding to stop doing this and start doing that. From heaven's perspective, change is a process. See, God is at work in you both to will and to work for His good pleasure. So the thing you're thinking about changing, He started working on it way back here. and circumstances came together and He touched you in different ways and He moved people in your life, and all those things have come together to help you change. And what we do as Christians so often is, the way Paul puts it is, starting with the Spirit, are you going to end with the flesh? So God has created this whole process to get us to the point of change. And then what we do is say, oh, I need to change. Okay, God, here's what I'm going to do. And we take over. And instead, what we need to do is look at it and say, okay, God, what kind of process do you have me in? What's it? How have you been doing this so far? And how can I align myself with your process, lean into it, so that what you're doing, you keep doing? Because you're the one that changes me. And this thing of leaning in, this is where a lot of Christians' understanding of biblical change breaks down. And it starts with the idea there's a process already underway. My job is to see that process and just make myself part of it, as opposed to when I see something wrong in my life, my job is to change it. So I want to take a couple examples of how you change to heaven's perspective. One other note just about the PowerPoint there. Those are 3 principles about how God works. There are also 3 statements about who God is. So if you look down at the bottom, God is for me, He is good. That's who He is all the time. He redeems circumstances to form me. He is the great Redeemer who can take anything and fix it. And His plan is a process. He's a God of becoming. He's not a God of rules that says, do it this way. He's a God that says, I will make you into what you were born to be. So let's look at a coaching example here. A number of years ago, I had this gal I was working with, switching pages in the outline here, and she was a young married. Her husband had just gone off on a deployment. He was in the Navy, so he was going to be gone for 6 months, and it was a young married small group, so there were all these people in there, and everyone else is married. Her husband's gone. So I caught her one night at the meeting, sort of sitting by herself, I think feeling a little sorry for herself. And so I just started asking her what's going on and what's happening with you. And she started talking about how she felt lonely, how left out it felt to all her friends were couples and her partner was gone. And one of the fundamental ways that God makes all things work together for good is He takes negative circumstances and folds them into your destiny. So often in a situation like that, one of the questions I asked is, so tell me, what are you called to? Who are you called to reach in your life? And she started talking about, well, I've always been drawn to the people on the fringes, the ones that are lonely, the ones that feel left out, the people that just don't seem to fit. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, okay, now that's really interesting because you're called to people who are feeling what you're feeling right now. So I sort of observed that to her and said, so if God was going to make a person who had the ability to touch someone who was left out and to understand them and to be able to speak the right word to them, what kind of life do you think they'd live? And she thought for a minute. She goes, oh. But the principle there is, at some point in your life, at least, you will live the life of the people you're called to reach. In other words, Jesus went through everything that we did, yet without sin, so that he can be an advocate for us. If you're called to reach a certain people group, you're going to need to go through some similar experiences to develop your heart for them so that you understand. And there's a qualification that comes when you've been through it. I had these friends once who had a baby that died like 4 days after it was born. And I watched his friend, my boss, build the coffin in the wood shop where I worked. And I went to the funeral and I saw them wrestle through the death of their baby. If I know somebody who has a baby that dies, I'm sending them to somebody like that. Because I've never gone through that. I don't know what it's like. But there, you say, this person went through what you did, go talk to them, and immediately there's a bond, and immediately they're open. So there's a power of qualification that comes when you live the life of those that you're called to reach. And so for this gal I was talking to, it shifted her perspective from, I'm really lonely, to, oh, I'm being prepared for my destiny. This is an opportunity for me to experience what these people experience and meet Jesus in it, so that I can help them meet Jesus in their loneliness. So that's sort of the principle. There are two ways I'm going to give you today for how you change to the perspective of heaven. The first is you help people see their circumstances as destiny preparation. And the second is you look at how your circumstances are forming your heart, your inward being. So take a minute and hang on a second, checking with the outline. So let's take a minute and tune into this in your own life. First of all, just jot down, who are you called to reach? And if you don't know, take your best shot. I mean, you don't have to exactly hit the target here, but what kind of people are you called to reach? Old, young, men, women, working in a certain industry with a certain problem, just jot something down. And then think about, is there a place in your life, when you want to reach those people, what characterizes them? What's the life they led? And is there a place in your life where you got to live the life of the people you're called to reach? So once you think of something, just type in, who are you called to, and where have you lived their life? So I'll give you a minute or two to think and jot something in. I'm going to stick a little music on while we do it. I'm not seeing many of you typing, so if you're not clear on what you're supposed to do, or you're not sure what it means to live the life of those you're called to reach, stick a question in there. Part of the principle behind this is most people's call is connected to some experience of suffering. Mothers Against Drunk Driving was started by a lady whose child was killed by a drunk driver. One of my best friends is a marriage counselor. His parents divorced when he was 14. People's call is often connected to that experience of suffering that's in their past. And that's one of the key ways that God redeems that suffering, is he takes it and makes a passion in you to touch the people that are losing what you lost and that need to meet him in the way that you met him. So, anybody, and again, just a sentence or two, question, or go ahead and pop your reflection up so people can see it. Okay, that's good, Karen. So for Karen, there was a season of rejection in ministry, and during a transition that helps her understand what people feel like when they're making that kind of transition. Somebody else? You can just make it brief too. So Patty, take that, divorced single moms. What are they experiencing? What are they feeling? What are the issues going on in their hearts? And where have you experienced that? Something similar to that. That's the connection that we're looking for. Everybody's typing now. Okay. So Wes is called to leaders in burnout. So for Wes, then the question would be, what do people in burnout experience? And how has God helped you? How have you experienced that in your life and met God in the way that these people need to meet God? So I think you're sort of getting the idea here, but what we want is, I want to get sensitive to that in my own life and see the connections between when I've led the life of the people I'm called to reach, so that as I'm working with people, I can do that. For me, I coach senior leaders in painful transitions, and a lot of my message is about meeting God in suffering. So I've had the privilege of serving under 3 leaders with various brokennesses and broken organizations, and lost my life's work and loaned my life savings out to my mentor and didn't get it back for 5 years. And so all those experiences put in me a compassion and a deposit. When you meet Jesus in something like that, it puts a deposit of power in you for them. So that's one way that we help move people to the perspective of heaven, is to say, what's your destiny, and how is what you're suffering preparing you to move into that destiny and power? And the principle I'm leveraging here is, when I have a common experience with you and meet Jesus in it, if I suffer and meet Jesus in that place, then I have what you need to meet Jesus when you're suffering. So the second principle here is about formation, And it's based on Romans 8:28. All things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And the word good in that scripture has a connotation of inward goodness. So all things work to put goodness in me, to make my inner world good, to bring holiness to me as I engage them from the perspective of heaven, as I engage them out of the purposes of God. So I'm going to invite Kevin to join me here for a little bit, and I'm going to coach him, and we'll see what happens. But what I'm going to be looking for is formation stuff. Where is God forming him and making something beautiful out of a difficult experience?
Lean over.
Here, well,
Hello.
yeah, Kevin, say 30 seconds about you.
My name is Kevin. I'm married to Sandra, who I think has been working with Tony for a bit. And I really love media production. I own a video production company, and I've been doing that for over 10 years now. And I also work with the church.
Okay.
And then I also have a passion for the church and this idea of fathering or pastoring. Okay. So those kind of my two heart passions.
Good. Can you guys hear us okay? Somebody real quick give me some feedback. Okay, great. Last time I did this, I had the wrong microphone hooked up, and I did the whole coaching thing, and nobody could hear what I was saying. So we're going to do better this time.
All right.
So what I want you to look for is, as I'm talking to Kevin, what does he believe? What beliefs do you hear in the way he's engaging the situation? And then the other thing is, how are we moving him to see this from the perspective of heaven instead of the perspective of earth? So, tell me a little bit about what you want to talk about.
I think in a nutshell, it has to do with this idea of not feeling powerful in the presence of powerful people. And specifically, I was thinking of just 2 mornings ago, I was sitting down with my wife, and we were having coffee, and I was thinking of a friend of mine who has recently moved into, or he's just going full on after something in his heart. And actually, the way he's going about it and what he's doing is so reflective of what I desire to see come out of myself. And it's not so much what he's doing, but it's, and I don't want that version of it. I want my own version of it. And so I was just noticing that here I'm watching somebody like empowered and going after something, and at the same time I know and I see what I want, but I feel so like unplugged at times. I don't know if that makes sense. And so there's a sense of, yeah, my own voice feels like, I feel like I've gone leaps and bounds from where I once was, but it's been challenging to feel like I'm able to express my own voice.
Okay. And as you think about this guy that's doing what you long to do and are having a hard time doing, I guess, from what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
What goes on inside of you when you see that? What do you feel?
I feel there's something that hurts. There is a sense of powerlessness, and it's like I'm looking, but feeling like I guess it feels like something just kind of attached. You push forward, but it feels like, man, I'm not moving, or it's just been really like slow going. You're like pushing, where
what do you think it ought to be like?
I feel like there's lots of challenges in life, regardless of needing some sort of baggage like that's.
I mean, you talked about pushing, and
Yeah.
do you feel like you shouldn't have to do that?
I feel like I'm dragging something. I'm not pushing through something. Yeah.
Okay. So it ought to not feel like I'm dragging something.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, here's another thought. And this is me just throwing a thought out there. Like, sometimes I feel like I can do things if somebody else is saying to do them or putting expectation, or it feels like I can just do it. But then when it comes to like a personal desire, um, it feels way more difficult.
And how should that feel? Should it be as easy to do a personal desire? Should it be easier? Should it be like it is?
Um, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't think it should be so difficult to do something that's in my own heart. It's like having, I was describing, it's almost like having a ton of passion and feeling like there's a really powerful engine and I've seen it operate, but as soon as I want to put something of my own in there, like it doesn't operate.
Okay.
But when somebody, like, maybe to make this clear and not so ethereal, it really has to do with video and film. And so, like, I've made projects for 1 million people, but seeing some of my own dreams and my own projects come to life have been really challenging. Yeah.
Okay. And how do you interpret what that means that your projects are harder?
Mm.
Does it mean something's wrong with you? Does it mean you haven't found the right thing? Does it mean, what does it mean?
I feel like it has to do with some belief system, and I feel like it's a reflection of my parents, to be honest. Because I can think of, yeah, so many examples in my life, or it's my relationship with my mom and my dad. I feel like my dad was a very strong, dominating personality, and my mom is very much like, let's do everything to make you happy. And I found myself mostly leaning on my mom's side throughout life. And if I look at examples and the demonstration, I've responded that way. And rarely do I respond in my dad's way unless it's like, this is definitely not working. It's like, all right, yeah, let's try this.
So your dad's way is a negative thing for you.
It has been.
Yeah. Okay. So let's play around a little bit with the other side of that. And what I'm going to do, I'm half off the screen. What I'm going to do is take those beliefs from Heaven's perspective there and see if we can apply them to the situation. So, and I'll try not to do this. So, what's the gift of that part of your dad for you? How has God, it may have been negative, it may have not been a great thing, but as God takes that and uses it for you, what's the gift of your dad's aggressiveness?
My dad has amazing ability to do things, to get things done. Like, he'll find a problem.
Now, don't think about what your dad's gift does. Think about how is the fact that that's been in your life. What's Jesus going to do with that to make it into a gift for you? What does it make you sensitive to?
I find I'm very sensitive of how I impact other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I find myself incredibly merciful and compassionate, and I don't like steamrolling people. Like, a lot. Like, I like to not enforce something. I like to hear.
Mm-hmm.
It's made me incredibly aware of other people.
Mm-hmm. How's that impacted your work life, that awareness?
Mm, I feel like I have a really good understanding of environments.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's really helped in the sense of, I mean, specifically with film, like storytelling, understanding how something's hitting somebody who's watching.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like
So
really,
you're more tuned into your characters and your audience and your.
yeah, and a much more like a deeper level than just like I understand communication, but I feel like I understand communication not just superficially, like here are the information and the facts, but like more at a heart level. Um, yeah, and that's been powerful.
So, so take off on, you and your friend. I don't know what your friend's doing, but what if your destiny is about that you just described? That there's a piece of that has to grow and form in you for you be able to do the thing.
Yeah.
He's looking at me funny.
No, I was just like you just want me to process that a little
Yeah,
bit.
talk about it.
Um,
It may or may not be true, but think about from the standpoint of your destiny. Is there a gift to your destiny in that sensitivity and that shifts the way it's going to be expressed?
I feel like it's going deep. Like I feel like God's pulling really deep on hmm, yeah, words. Um, I feel like God's helping me understand what it is to be powerful and powerless,
Mm-hmm.
and really in a way that like I desire, and I think God is doing. It's helping me so I can do that with and for other people too. Like not, and it sounds so generic sometimes. Like, I'm going through this for other people because I feel like God does things for our own sake.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not, although He absolutely there's other people
Right.
involved.
Well, let's go down that road. How is how has God used who your dad was in your life to form you into the image of Jesus? Again, the what your dad brought into your life could be good or bad, but Jesus is still going to use that.
Right.
So how is he using that to form you?
Hmm. Ooh, that's interesting. Um, I've watched the dynamics of my own dad as a pull towards the longing for a connection with father or with a father. Um, and it also has made me sensitive of other people's connections for a father and that sense of loneliness or disconnection or I don't know if I was going to use that term like the orphan heart of just bringing things into connection, bringing relationships in connection. Um, and I feel like God's really worked on that over time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like just a little bit of background. Both.
So just a
Sorry.
note here. So the thing that you felt like was a negative in your life has become a focus of God's activity in building you.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What is that? How does that impact you?
Um,
In other words, God seems to be investing in this area and saying, I'm going to build something here.
yeah, he has. And how has that impacted me? Or
No, how does it impact you to look at it that way?
hmm. think it just rings true. There's something of it that just, like I'm just feeling that knowing, like it just, I feel the difference of understanding something up here, but it just kind of continues to drop down deeper. And even as I look at my friend and I see him going after something and I go, oh, does that mean I'm going to miss out? Does that mean I don't get to do it because somebody else is doing it? Or all these fears or insecurities of like, oh, I can never be powerful or whatever. I feel like God's like wiping that away and going, no, look, like a confidence. I feel confidence, like a deep confidence growing.
As you look at what he's doing there.
Yeah, it's like, do you see it, Kevin? And I'm like, oh, I am. But I'm learning to trust and learning to believe. I'm like, okay, God, I'm believing you, but sometimes I get scared.
So if you step back from what your friend's doing
Mm-hmm.
and just look at the process that you're in, that God has you in to move you toward your dream,
Mm-hmm.
how would you describe that process right now? What's he doing?
It's never been so painfully aware of what I want and what feels in the way. Like I've never felt like I've had this much clarity of something of going, wow, those ways of thinking don't work that well. But also having a sense of like, man, that desire is very real. So
Now here's another thought. What if grappling with this thing that holds you back is the key to doing what you really want? That the depth and the connection and the impact that you desire, and that there's something in that, grappling with this thing that's going to allow you to take your dream to a whole nother level that you couldn't even envision without that. What strikes you in that? And again, what I'm looking for is not, is this a good idea?
right.
But is there something that touches your spirit? Or is there something that Jesus is saying in that? Because the perspective of earth is, my friend's succeeding and I'm not.
Right.
The perspective of heaven is, God is preparing me in a different way and I am on a different track than my friend. So what's the track I'm on and why am I on it?
Right.
And one of my observations about destiny tracks is the more your destiny involves dealing with people's hearts, the longer it tends to take to prepare you to do it.
Shoot. Dang it.
Why are you saying shoot?
Because I believe that. Like, it's this idea of aged wine, if I was going to use a picture. It's like, yeah, like I really like deep things. And I really like being deep. But I think deep, and whatever that means, what that means to me, usually does take time.
Right.
And I think,
So what would it look like? Right now it feels like you're fighting against that. Dang it, I don't want it to take time. What would it look like if you embraced that and said, this is me. My destiny is about depth. And shallow is easy. And we can do that quickly. But I'm going to go for 100 times the impact that.
Yeah. I'm gonna cry.
What makes you want to cry?
Like I want real impact. Like not just I don't know. I see these two things, like wanting to accomplish something, but really the accomplishing is you want something deep, like you that,
Hmm.
and so there's a sense of I want to rush, and I can do that. Like I have enough skill, power, intelligence to do this thing. But then I also see and I look and I go, but it hasn't matured to the fullness of what it needs to for it to really reflect my heart desire of
Right.
the thing.
If you were confident you wouldn't miss it, would you be afraid to take the extra time?
Well,
Or would it feel like a chore if you knew that what you were experiencing now was paying off, that you were on the right track, that this was the plan?
no, I it would be really good. Um, I think that would help me a ton. But I all of a sudden I'm hearing and I'm feeling this fear of I'll only get to do so much, or it won't. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to stop at this point, even though it'd be fun to continue. So that fear right there is the weight. Because if you didn't have that, you would throw yourself into moving toward death and not toward accomplishment. I'll let you think about that.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
And I'm, how do I say, sometimes in demos, I'm sort of going fast because we have 15 minutes.
Oh,
but
that's great.
Think about that whole thing of, so the fear of missing out is keeping me from embracing maybe who I am.
Yeah. Well, what's crazy is I feel like I'm actually missing out a lot because I'm not moving because I'm afraid I'm going to miss out.
Yeah.
So it's like.
Okay. Thanks. So, let's take, it's 6:30, but let's take a few minutes and just debrief. And type in a sentence or so. What did you see that was helpful or interesting to move him toward the perspective of heaven in this situation? And you can also, if you have a question about what I did or why I did it, feel free and stick that in as well. So I'm helping him see the pain he's feeling as a process. Can you put your finger, Joanne, on what exactly helped him make that shift? What did I ask, or where was the point where that happened? Again, what in that conversation helped him move from the perspective of earth to the perspective of heaven? That's good, Joanna. The asking him about the gift of his experience. So that's a frame. You know, a frame is a perspective. So the frame is my experience with my dad. Maybe is holding me back, or I'm seeing a picture of what I can't be. The different frame that I gave him was, what if we look at this as a gift? Wes says, seeing that the depth of heart takes time. That's the kind of insight that you get when you work with the hearts of a lot of people. And one of the things that's a sort of crucial part of doing this well is you have to know the ways of God and the processes of God in forming people. And the more you know, the more you have to give. So paying attention to how God is processing you is an important tool. Karen, can you say a little more? You asked him if he can grapple with the thing that's holding him back. What did that change? Or there was a point of, maybe you're referring to this, there was a point where I sort of challenged him to say, what if you stopped looking at it this way and started looking at it as this way? And it was an intentional challenge to say, can you make, is there a choice here that you can make to lean in? Why didn't I deal with this father wound? Just it wasn't the point of what I was trying to demonstrate. That would be a whole different coaching thing. So that's a good question. There's always multiple issues that come up in coaching, and you have to sort of pick what you're doing. And here the agenda was moving to the perspective of heaven, so that's what I did. So what do you, closing question here, what do you take away from this session? What did you learn, or what did you see that you can use? Give me a phrase or a sentence real quick on that, and we'll wrap it up. That's good, thinking of the negative as a gift from God. It's not the negative thing itself that's the gift. It's that Jesus will take anything, no matter how painful or ugly, and work to make a gift out of it. So I'm not trying to say, and this is a helpful distinction for people, I'm not trying to say this was a good experience, really. You thought it was bad, but it was good. No, it was a bad experience. But Jesus is going to move you through something to bring good out of that. What's that process? Good. Quick, two quick plugs here. There's a free excerpt of a book there in the file pod to the left. The book, The Calling Journey, has a lot of information that I've developed about the stages we go through as we move toward your destiny, and how you change that perspective, how you reframe around the ways of God. So if you're interested in what are these principles of the ways of God and forming people and moving them toward their destiny that I can leverage as I coach, that book is a great source of it. You can get that on Amazon, or you can get it on coach22.com. That's our bookstore. The other thing to mention, I have a course coming up in September 2014 called Living from the Heart. We offer this regularly, but the whole course, it's a 3.5-day workshop and 12 weeks of virtual follow-up. But that whole course is about helping people rewrite their stories from God's perspective. What's the perspective of heaven on your life, on their life? So we go in way more depth than this in that course. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, check it out. The website is www.meta-formation.com. So thanks for joining us today. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes afterward if there's any questions, but thanks for joining us.